One of our very first interviews was in Williamstown, Vermont, with a man by the name of AdamBoyce. We first met on what is called the town green in Williamstown, which is to say the green space in front of the town hall and historical society. Is it going?
Yep.
Okay, we are now in the town of Williamstown, Vermont, and we
have
have the town historian right alongside us. We're going to ask him a few questions about this town. But right now he's talking to somebody from upstate New York. If I remember correctly, it was a rather gray, rainy May morning. Adam was there on the town green talking to a couple of visitors from out of state. We came onto the green and decided to ask him a few questions. I think the first of which was, what was his favorite Vermont product?
Okay. Hello.
Hello,
What's your name?
AdamBoyce,
Okay, nice to meet you. And you're the town historian?
more or less.
Okay. What's your favorite Vermont product? Like maple syrup? Cheese?
Syrup is pretty good.
Do you
I've
like the
made
syrup?
it some.
What
yeah.
else is there to choose from? You're the queen of Vermont.
Cheese is
syrup.
good.
Vermont teddy bears.
Ben and Jerry's.
Can you give us some info about Williamstown?
Well, Williamstown was chartered in 1781, and the first settlers came here in 1784. It was presumably named for Williamstown, Massachusetts, because that's where some of the original settlers were from. Well, Thomas Davenport, the inventor of the world's first electric motor, was born here in 1802.
We'll take that
went to
one.
Brandon eventually.
Grandmothers.
Elijah Payne, I don't know how famous he was, but he was the first Supreme Court Justice for the Vermont Supreme Court in 1791. He was a U.S. Senator and a District Court Judge for years. And in the late 1880s, they had a railroad branch that came into town, ended right here. They had a turntable, just a single line that came in and out of town. And they had a granite industry for probably 50 or 60 years, 3 or 4 quarries in town. Pretty much today, I would guess most of the jobs are outside. It's more of a bedroom community.
Adam was a pretty easy man to track down, as he is a well-regarded fiddler in the Yankee tradition. With a quick search on the internet and some emailing back and forth, I arranged to meet up with him at his home. No longer in Williamstown, but rather West Windsor, after moving to be with the woman he fell in love with.
Well, I'm AdamBoyce. I live in West Windsor, Vermont. My family is called Vermont home since the 1760s. We were in Williamstown from the mid-1780s up through. I learned to play fiddle from Harold Luce in Chelsea, starting in 1991, and I've been trying to learn how to play ever since.
We've met before. Tell me how that played out from how you remember things.
Well, all I can remember is I probably was at the Historical Society building in Williamstown, and I was probably coming up to the Congregational Church, maybe to check on the clock, or I used to clean the church, I think, at that time. And all I remember is here's this car that pulls up and all these kids come jumping out, and I don't really remember what happened, but it seemed like they took some pictures and you asked some questions.
The very first question we asked you was nothing of any sort of serious consequence, but it was, what is your favorite Vermont product?
Yeah, oh, I still like the cheese, but I can't have it, or shouldn't have it. Maple is pretty good, so I would have to say, I have to say maple syrup is pretty good.
And you're a sugar maker yourself.
Yes. I think it's very therapeutic. Mm-hmm. The only way you can make $1 million sugaring is if you spend $3 million.
Could you kind of characterize your childhood a little bit for me and what Williamstown was like to grow up in?
Well, we were pretty isolated, rural. I mean, we grew up out in the fields and walking in the woods and things that probably parents would shriek about nowadays. But I mean, it wasn't easy. We knew we didn't have as much as some other people, but I don't recall we ever went hungry.
What were your hopes as a young boy in Williamstown growing up?
Well, it was to be a farmer originally, because that's what my grandfather was. I never thought I would ever leave Williamstown. I figured that was where my ancestors were, and that's where I wanted to be. But then love has a way of changing your mind. I went to this dance, and there was this lady who showed up, and at first there was some guy, I don't know who he was, but he was older, but he was quite a bit taller, and he was pretty buff, and I wasn't going to mess with him. And I managed to get in a couple of dances in between, but almost after every single dance he'd hold her hand like, you know, back away, get out of here. And ironically, he was a married man. He was just looking for a dance partner. And the last dance was a waltz, and I got to waltz with her.
Have you been as inspired by West Windsor's history since moving here?
I picked up some from some of the actual natives around here, but I don't feel I have any license as a Johnny-come-lately. And it was funny, somebody was talking about a former resident down here who lived across from where the post office is now. And he was talking about so-and-so, saying, you know, well, they're not from here. And the lady thought, well, you know, he sounded like a Yankee. No, he's from Heartland.
If I were to come back in another 12 years, what would you hope life in Vermont looked like?
Well, I hope I'd be able to keep living here. I think that's the other issue is affordability. All the politicians talk about it. I think the other big thing for West Windsor is whether we're going to have a school. That if we don't have a school because of not very many pupils, what the future is going to be like, who's going to be living here. I've given up on predicting things. My aunt wrote a weather column, but she never got into the weather predicting business. It was always better to do it after the fact, and people always ask me what kind of sugaring season it's going to be, and I said, I'll tell you in July.
This is what, 14?
Route 14.
And this will take us to Brookfield this way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Go that way.
That's our next town, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Thank
Oh, you're
you.
very welcome.
It's nice
Enjoy your
meeting
visit.
you.
Yeah,
Good day.
Thank you.
likewise. Yeah.